Good afternoon. I'd like to introduce Brother Paul J. O'Donnell. He has served in leadership of the Franciscan Brothers of Peace of the Archdiocese of St. Paul and Minneapolis since 1988. The Franciscan Brothers of Peace originated within the Catholic Right to Life movement and consider the promotion of the gospel of life to be their primary and central chairman. Charism, sorry. Where was I? Oh, dear. Okay, Brother Paul received his bachelor's degree in communications from the University of St. Thomas in 1982. Brother Paul was a primary caregiver to Brother Michael Kowalski, FBP, their severely disabled founder, for over 12 years until Brother Michael's death on August the 28th, 2003. Because of their own experience, Brother Paul and the Franciscan Brothers of Peace were the forefront of the battle to save the life of Terry Schindler Schiavo. Brother Paul.
Hi, thank you. Well, it's good to be here, and thank you, first of all, for coming on this Friday night for this workshop. As I was introduced, I am Brother Paul O'Donnell of the Franciscan Brothers of Peace, and our community was founded in the Catholic Church in 1982 by Brother Michael Gawarski. Brother Michael Gawarski and I were friends in college. We were best friends before the Franciscan robes that you see on me today. And in 1981, while we were caring for people who were dying of AIDS at that time, because our community ran a hospice home for men dying of AIDS, Brother Michael didn't come down from our upper room to relieve me, and I had been up all night caring for 3 critically ill patients. When I went up to the room, I found him laying in bed. The sun was shining in the windows. He looked very gray in color. And I looked at his face, and I saw this crease. And I thought, I never noticed that before. And as I approached him, I saw that the crease on his face was blood. And I realized he wasn't breathing. And I realized he had no pulse or no heartbeat. So not only did I have 3 critically ill patients downstairs, I had my only help and assistant, for some unknown reason, clinically dead. So frantically, I started to do CPR, call 911, and do what I could do. And for a short period of time that seemed like hours, but it was really a matter of minutes, we were fortunate to have a fire station and paramedics 1 block away from our facility. So they arrived there. So we know for sure he had to be clinically dead for more than 4 minutes. They were able to revive him, and he was in a coma for a while, and then what they called a persistent vegetative state. He was 32 years old. We did not know this at the time. We found out later through a mutual friend that he said he felt sick and that he was coming down with a cold, but he was over at our facility to help me out. We found out through the doctors that he had a sudden bacterial pneumonia, and it was a similar pneumonia that Jim Henson had, the creator of the Muppets. It's one that strikes very quickly and usually causes death, usually within hours. And this struck him, and it left him in a severely brain-injured state. I became involved in the pro-life movement when I was 13 years old, in 1973, when the Roe versus Wade decision was made. I had been involved in testifying before state legislatures at the age of 16. I started Right to Life chapters. I started college chapters. I did fundraising. I did political work in both the Democrat and Republican Party. I knew about euthanasia. I knew about what was happening in Holland and the Netherlands. I knew that there were organizations which were named at that time the Hemlock Society, but I had no idea how bad it was in our healthcare system. And that was many years ago, 1982, what I experienced. And it's far worse today. And it's because of those anti-life forces and my own lived experience and the lived experience of my community that we've been coming here each year to share that and to encourage people to do what they can. And with the same vigor and zeal that we fight for the preborn child in the womb, we need to defend the vulnerable, the sick, and the elderly, and defend the whole gospel of life. After Brother Michael was revived, they took him to the Hennepin County Medical Center. Now, I got in a car and zoomed with another brother to the hospital and actually beat the ambulance there. And the first thing is I was taken into a trauma room. And there was a specific registered nurse that was there to counsel me or the family or whoever shows up in that trauma room. Within 2 minutes, Brother Michael had been brought in. I asked, is he going to be okay? Is he okay? And she said, I don't think so. It doesn't look very good. I said, I just want him to live. I just want him to live. And she said, you know, if your friend lives, he will probably be a vegetable the rest of his life, and you wouldn't want that for your friend. This was within 2 to 3 minutes of arriving at the hospital in a crisis situation. So, being the strong pro-life person I said, thank you very much for your services. I don't wish to talk to you anymore. And so, you can see by the way I'm dressed, and those listening maybe can't, but I'm in a Franciscan habit with a crucifix on, so I'm obviously a spiritual person. So they thought maybe the chaplain might be able to deal with me. The chaplain came in, and the chaplain said, things don't look very good, brother, and I would like to know if you would consider donating Brother Michael's organs to help somebody else. That would be the greatest gift of life that your community could give. And I said, absolutely not. So we were praying. All the brothers were coming to the hospital. Brother Michael's family was coming to the hospital. He was placed on a ventilator. It did not look very good at all. However, when he was in that unstable condition, the doctors give patients medicines to stabilize their blood pressure, to do all the things they need to try to stabilize the person. So the way they explained it to me is he was on enough medication that he would not be able to respond to me. And when I walked into the intensive care unit and I said, Michael, I'm here, he opened up his eyes and looked at me, and the nurse said, oh my God, he responded to you, because he shouldn't be able to do that. The sad thing is when he opened up his eyes to me and looked at me, I knew things were forever changed for him and forever changed for me. I just knew it. You wanted to have hope, but I knew things were forever changed. To make a long story short, we insisted that he get the care he needed. The attending physician was a Dr. Ronald Cranford. Just to fast forward, that was one of Terry Schiavo's physicians. He has advocated for the death of more than 30 people who have been in so-called vegetative states. I quickly said, no, thank you. We want another doctor. So there wasn't much choice. So they sent in his colleague who had the exact same position. But they didn't know who I was, and they didn't know that Brother Michael was an outspoken pro-life leader. He was on Mother Angelica's EWTN. He was on Catholic and Christian radio. He was founded pro-life organizations. They didn't know who he was. And I didn't want to say anything at the time because I thought it might compromise his care. So the doctor said, no, we'll care for him. We'll take care of him. We'll do everything we can. And the next, 24 hours will be very critical. But he said, I want you to know there's two groups that may have issues with this, and you need to be very aware because they have a contingency in this hospital. And I said, oh, who's that? And they said, well, Minnesota Citizens Concern for Life, one of our nurses on the ethics committee belongs to them, and then Pro-Life Action Ministries. And he didn't realize that I was the president of Pro-Life Action Ministries, and Brother Michael was the chairman of the board. So I said, okay, we'll be aware. So it was a grueling week in intensive care. The man was 32 years old. They didn't want to treat. I had Chancery officials at the time tell me it would be okay not to treat him, not to do anything, that this was God's timing. And everybody was so quick to give up on this 32-year-old man. And when you're in a crisis, you're very vulnerable. Well, by the grace of God, Brother Michael did start to respond, not only by opening his eyes and a few little things, but started to respond, and they were able to remove the ventilator, and he was in what they called a classic persistent vegetative state. And this was probably 6 days after this illness took hold. At that time, they said, well, you need to find a nursing home to put him in. And I thought, oh my gosh, this was my best friend. He's 32 years old. And I might have a different opinion now, being in my 50s, but at the time, I just couldn't put a 32-year-old man in a facility that had people in their 70s, 80s, and 90s. It didn't seem right. So I was very hostile to that. And so I said, well, why can't we just, provide treatment and help and therapy? And they said, well, we don't do that. Maybe you can find a nursing home. And so they suggested several nursing homes that I visited, and quite frankly, I wouldn't put my yellow Labrador retriever there, let alone a human being. The state of condition, I wouldn't be able to live with myself and do it. So every facility they were, recommending to me, I was turning down, and I tried to get some Catholic facilities to maybe take him. And this has always been a struggle for me, but I went to the Little Sisters of the Poor. They do have a nursing home. They're a religious community. And Brother Michael had worked for the Little Sisters of the Poor. He loved the Little Sisters of the Poor. We have a great relationship with the Little Sisters of the Poor. And that community wanted to bring him into their facility. And they went all the way to their Mother General in France, and they said no, because their charism is only for the elderly. So I went to Catholic Elder Care, which was run by the Dominicans, and got the same response. Brother Michael could not be there. So Bishop Carlson, who is now the Bishop of St. Louis, or Missouri, said, well, why don't you try the Hawthorne Dominican Sisters? And they run a cancer home. And I thought, well, for Brother Michael to be with all these dying people, but I just didn't think we could do it. We were a small religious community of, I think, 10 brothers at the time. And so I said, well, I'll meet with them. And I went over, and I'll never forget, Sister Luke said, Brother Paul, you don't have to worry about anything. We'll take care of Brother Michael if that's what you want, for as long as he lives. But she said, why are you giving up on this man? I said, what do you mean? She said, there are places that can help him. There are hospitals right in St. Paul that help people that are on ventilators. And why are you giving up on him? I mean, the fight's just beginning. So I took that feisty old nun's words, and I went to look at Bethesda Hospital. Well, the Hennepin County Medical Center, where Brother Michael was at, was saying, you have to get him out. He can't stay here. You know, they have their Medicare guidelines and who can be here. And so the pro-life activist side of me came out, and I said, look, he's not going anywhere. If you want to roll him out in the street, fine. But be assured, I'll call all the media. And Brother Michael and I, we used to joke because we were in front of Planned Parenthood picketing and sidewalk counseling, and we would joke with each other and say, okay, if they hit us or a car hits us or they do something, call the media first, then 911. So they started to back off. We were able to get him into the Bethesda Hospital. And the Bethesda Hospital in St. Paul was a fantastic hospital with great services. And I started to breathe a breath of fresh air, and it was a Christian hospital. It wasn't Catholic, but it was a Christian hospital. And I started to feel relaxed, and I started to feel, okay, I'll accept whatever comes. And like I said, I kind of knew what was coming forward. Michael was there for about 3 weeks, and they said, well, you need to find another facility. I said, well, I thought this was a place that helped people that were on ventilators and had programs and everything. And she says, well, we help people with strokes or cerebral palsy. And yes, we do help people on ventilators, but he's medically stable and he doesn't need that high quality care. So he can't stay here. And I was really upset. And his physician that was very good treated Brother Michael like just a patient. His bedside manner wasn't that great, and it's like Michael had a life that wasn't there. He was like a living corpse. Then one day, a neurologist walked in, and he saw the brothers never left. You know, we were there caring for him and his interaction with us. He started slowly turning his head and eyes, and the neurologist said, I think we may be able to help Brother Michael, or at least give it a try. And that would allow him to stay here for a while, probably at least months and months till you can figure out what to do. I said, well, what do you want to do? And he said, let's start a coma stimulation program here. And he started to explain to me what that would entail. And to make a long story short, what we did is we set a particular routine up that would help people that needed stimulation. And one of the things is that he would have physical therapy, and they would work with him to try to get him to communicate in some way by raising his finger, plus doing the normal PT. Then he would have OT. He would also occupational therapy. Then they would bring in like recreational therapy. Well, what do you do for recreation with a person in a chronic state like that? Well, you know, they would play music, but the stimulation part was to play music that he really liked and then music that he really hated, to play it really soft or to play it really loud, and that was the music part. Try to get the senses going. They would bring in cloves of roasted garlic and place it on him, and then they would have perfume. Now, we all cringe when we think of roasted garlic on us, but when the brain is injured, everything's all scrambled, so you don't know what reaction you're going to get. So something that's something foul to us is relieving to them, or something that is very sweet to us is repulsive to them. So we started doing different things. We went home, the recreational therapy decided, let's try to stimulate his memory in that, and said, can you draw a picture of your house? And I said, our house is 23,000 square feet. So I went home to the brothers and assigned each brother to do a particular room. And I'm not kidding you, I never knew there was such giftedness, because they came back with these great drawings of our chapel and different things. And they placed it all over the walls. And she would wheel his wheelchair there. And, do you remember eating these meals in this place? And there was really no response until, boom, he hit the chapel and his head and eyes turned, because Brother Michael's spirituality was very important to him. The doctor that had the horrible bedside manner decided, when he was hearing all these good reports of some response, decided, I'll come in and check it myself. So he came in, and Brother Michael's mother was there, and Brother Michael was there, and I was not. And the doctor said, Brother Michael, I'm Dr. So-and-so, and he said, if your mother's in the room, I want you to look at her and blink your eyes 3 times. And he turned his head and looked at her and blinked his eyes 3 distinctive times. And then he said, if Brother Paul is in the room, I want you to blink your eyes 4 times in a row, very slowly. And he did. Or he didn't, because I wasn't in the room. Then he asked if another brother was in the room, and he did the correct response. And then this doctor's whole attitude changed. That particular doctor is now caring for Brother Michael's father, who has Alzheimer's disease, and is studying geriatric care. And so a whole transformation took place. And we had doctors and nurses that said they used to advocate for withdrawal of food and hydration until they met Brother Michael. Catholic physicians. So that was our lived experience. As I was caring for Brother Michael and the brothers, we came into contact with other families that had loved ones from diving accidents, car accidents. And, unlike when you have an unwed mother that needs help and you say, here's a support group or here's a crisis pregnancy center, the Right to Life movement really didn't have anything. We had our teachings and we had our positions, but where do people go? And so I started befriending people and traveling and speaking, and National Right to Life started asking me to come and give workshops, and started speaking all across the country on medical advocacy for persons with disabilities. And in the year 2004 is when I met Bobby Schindler, the brother of Terry Schiavo. Brother Michael had passed away, but when I saw Terry, I saw Brother Michael. And I really thrusted myself upon this family because I wanted to help them. And that's how I became involved. My background was in broadcasting and journalism. And so the family asked me to be one of their official spokespersons. And so at that time is why I was on Fox and CNN and Matt Lauer and all those kinds of shows. But my role was always motivated because when I look at persons with disabilities, I have a great love and affection. I don't know if some of you were in the room today when Senator Rick Santorum talked about his daughter. And it's like, it hit me like a ton of bricks. I get emotional thinking about it. Because once you've cared for somebody, once you've loved somebody in that condition, you see things differently. And when you realize like 90% of women that are pregnant with a Down syndrome child want to abort that child, I have friends that have kids with Down syndrome, and it's probably their salvation. It's the love of their family. I was just in a workshop with the teens talking about some of these issues, and one of the teens said, I know my brother who has Down syndrome changed my life because I'm the person I am today because of him. And she said, I was away for a few days and I came back, and his hug when I came back was the best thing in the world. And a nurse once asked me, why would something horrible like that happen to Brother Michael? And my response was, well, so that you and I would become better people, more loving people, more compassionate people. So we were involved in the Terry Schiavo case, and after her death, I continued on. There's a whole legacy in what that involved, working with the church to get our Catholic Church teaching up to date, which was very much out of date concerning modern medicine and what was going on, and try to catechize people, because people, they were more catechized by the media and by television than they were about medical facts. I mean, if you look at the year that this was happening, there were two films that came out. One received Hollywood awards and all kinds of accolades, and it was about a boxer whose trainer killed her. It was on assisted suicide. That won all the awards. But the one that made the most money, the one that had more people attending it, received no awards, Passion of the Christ. That's the values. People buy in, pulling the plug. People have no idea really what's involved. And so this has been my passion with my community support. We do all kinds of pro-life work in other areas, but this is kind of my area in sharing Brother Michael's legacy and Terry's legacy. And now, if anybody has been reading, hasn't been too popular here in the United States, but the whole baby Joseph Miracoli case. Again, I just happened to be surfing the internet, and I found this story. And I thought, oh my gosh, 13-month-old baby, they're not, the baby has a neurological condition, on a ventilator. The hospital wants to remove life support against the parents' wishes. The parents want a simple trach done, wean the baby off the ventilator and bring the baby home and let God decide when the baby's going to die. The hospital told the family they would give the baby an injection to calm him down, make everything peaceful and relaxful, and then they would remove the ventilator. They said, no, we don't want our son choking, and they had cared for a previous daughter that had this condition, and they brought her home, and she lived fine at home for 18 months. They wanted to bring their son home. The hospital said no in Canada, the London Health Science Centre. They went to the Consent and Capacity Board. What is that? It's death panels. I know Sarah Palin made that a big, no word, but we have them here in the United States, and we have them there in Canada. In the United States, they call them fetal care committees or ethics committees, but in Canada, they have a government system where if the hospital wants to remove support or any medical care, they can take it to this committee. The committee ruled against the parents. The parents decided, we're going to challenge this in the courts. The courts ruled against the parents. When the parents, when the ruling came down, the parental rights were stripped. So a mother and a father could no longer make the decision about their child. They were court ordered to comply and to do nothing to interfere. And they have a legal guardian, a state guardian, that then had to carry out the wishes. And those wishes were to be on February 21st of this year. February 21st in Canada is Family Day. It's a national holiday. You play with your kids, you get the park, you do all this. And the Canadian courts ordered this 13-month-old baby to be killed on Family Day. I found out about this, and to make a long story short, we found out about February 17th. We applied a lot of social pressure through Facebook and YouTube and the internet, and we fought for this child's life. I did not think we were going to win. We were able to get him into the United States through the help of many different people. He was able to have the trach performed. He was weaned off the ventilator. He was taken off about 10 medications. He has never had pneumonia. He's never been on antibiotics. He is not taking any nebulizers. He doesn't require any extra oxygen. He is neurologically impaired, and he came home on Holy Thursday, and he's at home, and he's doing fine. So he's alive today. It's because of this passion that I do want to ask you to think of some things that that we need to do as a movement that's very, very important. And I'm not going to spend lots of time, because I know at the convention you get lots and lots of information. So some of these things I'm going to rattle through a little quickly. And then I want to show you a DVD of Brother Michael, so that you can see who he was, and I'll explain that and then have some questions and answers. But the first thing I wanted to share with you is we need to advocate for our vulnerable brothers and sisters. If our parents are in a nursing home, or they're ill, or we have a sick child, you need to have someone to be a medical advocate. Gone are the days when you can call good old Dr. Smith and the family doctor and you would trust that he will take care of everything. You cannot do that anymore. You have to have a medical advocate. It is good for adults to have some type of advance directive, and I know National Right to Life has a will to live. It's good to have, but to be very honest with you, that is only a piece of paper. And we see that ethics committees and fetal care committees are just tearing that up, and they are taking families to courts, and the courts are ruling against them. We deal with like 2 or 3 cases every week of families that have courts rule against them, and they don't take the family's rights. However, you can make it difficult for them by having a medical advocate. And for those of you that, you want to prepare, you want to make sure things are happening, you need to talk to a trusted friend. It may be a spouse, but it may be another close friend. And maybe you want to have 2 people. And it is always a good idea to have some type of something in writing and a healthcare proxy. It's also very important to understand the language that they're speaking, because it's not language based on Judeo-Christian principles, and that's what this country was founded on. Quality of life means nothing. That's a secular opinion that we bought into because they play into our fears. Nobody wants to suffer. I don't want to be a burden. This could be a hardship. It's become a religion. People want personal autonomy, absolute personal autonomy. Some personal autonomy is okay. What's absolute personal autonomy? It means I decide. If I don't want any tubes, if I don't want any help, if I don't want any medicine, it's my rights, it's my body, I have the right to decide. Where have we heard that before? And then we're forced, and my mother used to do this all the time to me. Oh, I don't want to be a burden to you kids. And I just say, shame on you. Where there's love, there's no burden. And, we can't buy into that. We have the right to make certain medical decisions, but not all this burden and all this stuff that they use emotional arguments. And when you're 81 years old here, if you're sick and in the hospital, you're very vulnerable. And medical personnel can be very suggestive. My mother was 77 years old. I'm not going to go into details, but she had chronic lung disease. She was in critical condition. The palliative care doctor came in and said, Mary Kay, if you had to live your life on a ventilator, the rest of your life on a ventilator, would you want to do that? And she said no. And he took that as to mean that, okay, I can put a DNR/DNI order on her against my father's wishes. And so we had to call a healthcare conference, and my brother, he's kind of young and opinionated. He said, do you know who that is? And he said, yeah, we know all about Shivo, and we don't care. So I had to fight for my own mother's life. You need people who are willing to fight, especially people with Alzheimer's or people that have chronic conditions. It's important to realize that any medical decision you have to make, most likely, you can take 24 hours to think about it. Sometimes they want you to make a decision right away, and if you don't want to make a decision, you can take 24 hours to think about it. You have the right to a second opinion, and you should get a second opinion. You must be willing to advocate and fight the insurance companies if you need to for your loved ones. Insurance companies, the bad, dark side of it, is that if your loved one needs a special mattress to prevent bed sores or a special wheelchair or things, they give all kinds of rejections. And you know what? 90-some% of people just accept it. But it's the ones who appeal and fight win. And that's what you have to be willing to do. And that's why my work with the Terri Schiavo Life and Hope Network is so vital. Because if you don't have those resources, we can help find those resources for you. We need to realize that food and water is ordinary care. Nutrition and hydration is ordinary care. Even if it requires medical assistance to receive that, water is water, and it's natural. Now, yes, you have a right to make certain medical decisions, but please, please, please do not confuse end-of-life issues with what's active imposed death. Terri Schiavo probably would have lived another 20 years. It was an imposed death because she was disabled. Baby Joseph was scheduled to be killed February 21st. He's alive today. That's imposed death. Any action they would have done would have constituted euthanasia. It is killing somebody deliberately, intentionally. Now, I know the intellectuals can argue and say, well, he would die from lack of breathing, but they were going to remove the ventilator to cause his death. If you're diagnosed with cancer, if you know your life on earth is short, then yeah, you don't have to take chemotherapy, or you can make decisions on what you want to do. But food and water, when the time comes, a qualified hospice nurse, there are some good ones, can know, okay, you're no longer able to assimilate that. Usually you can recognize the signs of death about a week ahead of time. But to stop food and hydration 2 or 3 weeks and to make that the cause of death, it's like a friend of mine who was 49 years old dying of cancer said, I don't want to die of starvation. If I'm going to die, I'm going to die of cancer. And so we need to know the difference and educate ourselves between what is imposed death and euthanasia and what is truly end-of-life issues. Some resources for you that are very, very good, of course, is NRLC here, the National Right to Life Committee, and they have an excellent website and a division here, and that's nrlc.org for those of you that are computer savvy, or there's going to be a whole session tomorrow addressing some of these issues. Terri's Life and Hope Network, and we have exhibit booths out there, but that's Terri's Fight, Terri with an I.org. Another good one is the Catholic Medical Association, not the Catholic Health Association. Just because something has Catholic by their name doesn't necessarily mean they're good. But the Catholic Medical Association is all Catholic physicians that adhere to the teachings of the Church. And they are at CathMed, CathMed.org. One of my best, number one resources is the National Catholic Bioethics Center. Now, you don't have to be Catholic to get this or read it, but it's clear teaching. And theirs is NCB Center, CENTER, ncbcenter.org. And they have some excellent, it explains what you should do, what you can't do, it just explains it for the average lay person. And so those are some excellent resources. I think it's also important for those of you here and as you're educating people to not just make a blanket statement and then you're done with it, like a will to live. How often do you renew your driver's license? Every 4 years? You shouldn't make a decision because how you feel at 30 may be different how you feel at 40, and how you feel at 40 may be different than how you feel at 81. And you need to look at things, and you need to be careful on what you're doing. So it's very important. Somebody said the other day, and again, I'm referring to my mother, be careful of DNI orders. It's okay if you're dying, if you have cancer and it's terminal and you know your time on earth, But again, when this doctor put my mom on a DNI, and we fought it, another hospital in that Catholic facility came and said, you did the right thing. He was an infectious disease control doctor because he said, you know what? DNI means do not treat, do not care. And that was coming from a physician at a Catholic hospital. You have to be careful. The thing is, again, an example, I'll do my mother and my father. My mother had chronic pulmonary disease. She had to be placed on a ventilator. After that, she said, Paul, I don't ever want to go on a ventilator again. And I said, well, why don't we cross that bridge when it comes? She said, nope, I don't ever want to go on it again. I have all these, things going on. I said, okay, if that's your decision, you don't have to go on it again. So I was my mother's healthcare proxy. And so she started developing problems breathing, and she was taken to the hospital from the nursing home, and she was in intensive care, and my younger brother was there, and they called me and said, your mom's in this condition, and she will die if we don't put her on a ventilator. And I said, well, she doesn't want to go on a ventilator, and I have to, she's 77, she's had these problems, she's in poor health. And the doctor said to me, Brother Paul, your mother's just nodding her head that she will go on the ventilator. So while watching the Republican National Convention and Sarah Palin, and my mom was, she was this feisty woman, she was weaned off the ventilator 3 days later, and I looked at her, and she looked at me, and she said, when they said I only had 2 minutes or so, I changed my mind. And we both laughed. She did die about 4 weeks later, but then she was ready. Then she knew. My father, 5 separate open heart surgeries, bypass surgeries. The 5th surgery was a quintuple bypass. He was on dialysis. He had congestive heart failure. He only had 5% heart function. So he was driving his car because I couldn't get him to stop at age 76 at that time. And he had a heart attack. He wasn't wearing his seatbelt. He hit the steering wheel, and it defibbed him enough that he could walk into the local bar. Then he had another heart attack right there. They called the paramedics. He was rushed to the intensive care unit at the nearest hospital. I'm flying home. I scramble to get into the intensive care unit. The doctor tells me if your father's going to survive, he needs to have a heart pacemaker put in. And to do that, he would have to go on a ventilator. Now, my dad had been on a ventilator 5 times. He made the same statement. If the Lord takes me, I'm going home. And so I said, he doesn't want to go on the ventilator. And it was, Paul, I think we should do what the doctors, it's okay. And he went on the ventilator. And he lived for 3 years beyond that and was able to celebrate his 50th wedding anniversary with my mother and dance at his granddaughter's wedding. And when he did die, none of us knew. I mean, we had been prepared for death for 20 years with all this stuff, so we never really knew. We used to have a sign on his television set that says, the longer you complain, the longer God lets you live. And so we thought he might live forever. But one day I got a call. I talked to him a couple days beforehand, but he was going to dialysis. You know, he'd get up at his assisted living and he'd go down and take the bus to dialysis 3 times a week. And he didn't come down for his appointment. And the nurse went up and found him, and he had died peacefully in his sleep, holding a rosary in his hand. And so he died when God wanted him to die. So the point is, don't just make a blanket statement. Check things out, and we need to be very, very careful. I would like to close just by having you view this DVD. And my screen is blank, so maybe I'm going to figure out how to light this up. And this was done, I'm just going to give a preliminary before you click it on. Do I have to scan again?
I think so.
Oh, please, I hope.
It's coming back on the screen.
Okay. Brother Michael and I know. Okay. But Brother Michael and I were very active in the pro-life movement. And I always say in the early days, it was my naughty days. Naughty days, as I was so young, I was getting arrested at abortion clinics and all those kinds of things. So those were our young college days. We eventually realized we can't be effective if we're in jail all the time. So you'll see some pictures of Brother Michael getting arrested a few times. But this was the organization he and I founded, and it was a little tribute they put together for him.
You swipe your finger.
And I got to swipe my finger so many times, I don't know who's... Okay. Swipe finger to unlock. It's not. Well, we may have to. It'll be at our exhibit booth. I don't know what else to do, because we used to, when we attended the conventions, you always ordered these things at the hotel. The hotel brings them in. But now it's so expensive. Everybody has these gadgets. And there's so many gadgets and adapters. We've been going back and forth. Well, we've been trying for hours.
Well, those fellows are all usually.
Yeah. There we go. Let's say. Okay. And Brother John Mary will turn down the lights if we get this to play, and check where volume is.
That's a good question.
If we are truly pro-life, if we're truly Christian, and that you and I really truly believe that what's going on inside these abortion chambers is the killing of our unborn brothers and sisters, then you and I aren't going to let one calendar month go by without spending at least 2 hours at the scene of the crime. I don't believe that anyone is too busy or is doing something so important or vital that he or she cannot spend at least 2 hours a month to save babies and to help women. At the very least, to mourn the deaths.
With all my heart and soul, till the day that I'm with Jesus, the day I'm finally home, the day that I have won the crown.
We've got to bring the light of Jesus. We've got to bring the light within us to these places of darkness.
Jesus at his side, the Father will rise and say, welcome home. You're a good and faithful servant. Come in and take your reward.
Have you heard the funeral bell lately? It's tolling every 18 seconds in this country. A human life is crushed out every 18 seconds by abortion. The bell tolls for you every 18 seconds. Are you involved in the human race? Can you hear it? Can you hear it? No? Why not? Why can't you hear it? Perhaps because no one is in the belfry. Why don't you go into the belfry? Take hold of the cord and pull the bell. Pull the bell, sound the alarm. There's a Holocaust going on. A silent Holocaust. There's a war going on. It's a war on the human race. There's a war going on. It is a war on helpless little people, unborn people, unborn babies. There is a war going on. It is a war on the most basic, fundamental human right. The right to which, if you don't have it, you don't have anything. The right to live life. Ask not for whom the bell tolls, for it tolls for you, and it tolls for me. May God bless you.
With all my heart and soul, till the day that I'm with Jesus, the day I'm finally home, the day that I have won the crown. As for me, I will press on in running the race, with my eyes fixed on Jesus, who inspires and perfects my faith. I will fight the good fight with all my heart and soul, till the day that I'm with Jesus.
Brother Michael was an outspoken defender of human life, but in 1991, he suffered a bacterial pneumonia and went into respiratory and cardiac arrest. This condition left him severely brain damaged. So, so that's how it got started in the other end of the spectrum for me after caring for Brother Michael. And it's just continued on and on and on. So it's part of my passion. If you have a question, if you want to go there asking me to have people use that mic, but if it's short, Brother John Mary can hand it to you. It's real simple. Well, maybe not so simple. We'll see if it works. There you go.
I'm sorry, I can't remember. How long was Brother Michael ill?
12 and a half years.
Oh, my.
Yeah, 12 and a half years. And it was through that illness that I learned so much that when Brother Michael would go to the hospital, the doctors and nurses all knew me. And when I would go, like if he needed a feeding tube replacement or something, they eventually would let me be in radiology with them. And I learned all his cares. The brothers learned all his cares. And the premise, you know, eventually we had other ministries we were involved in, but when Brother Michael first became ill, we thought, here we're caring for all these strangers and people dying of AIDS. We thought of the words of Mother Teresa, no, love begins at home. And that's another thing that people sometimes when something hits, you think, oh, I can't do this, and oh, this wouldn't be possible. And then you learn, and again, I think it made our community much better men of God and much better men of faith and better pro-life individuals having had that experience. And like I said, it's had a snowball effect that we've been able to be involved in other cases. We haven't always won. And sometimes when the other side, there was a case, again, I was surfing on the internet. I found this story. I couldn't believe, woman goes without food and hydration for 36 days. And I think, oh my gosh, 36 days. I've never heard of that. And so there was a Facebook page, and I clicked on, and I started messaging the husband, who I think truly loved his wife. But long story short, she had a brain tumor. She had a headache and collapsed on her wedding day. And they removed most of the tumor, but couldn't remove it all. They told them that it would probably be about 6 months, but that, she had gone into a vegetative state. So they said, they encouraged him to withhold food and hydration. And that's when I thought, you don't know how, doctors aren't soothsayers. Nobody knows, how long they have to live. And, I try to tell people, you don't know. Like with my mother and father and their chronic illness, I was happy in some ways for the end for their illnesses, because I saw my mother and father more in love than I saw them through 50 years of marriage. So those last couple of years meant more to me than the first beginning years. So you don't know. So I tried to reach out to this husband and tried to educate. And then 46 days went by. And then 50 days. And then 55 days. And I'm thinking, they got to be hydrating her. They got to be hydrating. And I kept writing messages to him. Do you think a month without food and water that maybe she's trying to tell you something? I forgot who said it at the convention. Might have been in the workshop I was at in the teens. You say at one point in your life, oh, I never want to live that way. But then when you're forced with it, you have a different mindset. Johnny Erickson Tada said the same thing about her condition. And you don't know sometimes until you're right there. And she went 56 days without food and hydration before she died. I still message the husband just to try, because you never know who's going to be the next Norma McCorvey or the next Bernard Nathanson or the next person that might help. Then, I always pray for people, even if I don't agree with when I'm dealing with these hardcore issues. There's another baby in Denver. Unwed parents. Baby had chronic cerebral palsy and other health issues. They were so inspired by what Michael Shivo did to Terry, they decided that the time had come for them to remove the feeding tube. They had their local minister come in. They had a little service and prayed together. They bought the little child, who was 4, a puppy, and that puppy was kind of like his teddy bear in bed. They removed the feeding tube, and they thought, he would die fairly soon. Children tend to last longer than adults sometimes, and they thought in 2 weeks, 3 at the longest, he'd be gone. And this boy went 27 days without food or hydration and was written up in the Denver papers, and it was a tribute. It was a tribute. In the Atlanta Journal, this Tricia DeGoy that went 56 days, it was a love story, tragedy, and it was. I felt really sick. You can imagine the made-for-TV movie with a couple in love and collapses on our wedding day, and it's horrible. But people are so vulnerable in that moment, and that's why we need to create these support groups and educate ourselves and help people. But we've saved lives too, and baby Joseph is the most recent example. So I don't know if anybody has any questions or comments. Yes, you might want to, I'll just...
About the issue with cancer and whether someone, needs to get chemotherapy or not, what would be some examples? With any type of cancer, are you required to get the chemo and radiation, or if you have a good chance of living, then you do, or how does that work?
Well, I personally, it depends on the individual, because you do have the right, no matter what faith perspective that you're coming from, you have the right to make medical decisions, and each person may be different. For example, my friend Dan Barry suddenly found out that he had a cancerous tumor that was blocking off his digestive tract. He tried chemotherapy, but it just made him so violently sick. He said, if I only have a few months to live, I'd rather not do it that way. And perfectly fine if death is going to occur, and we know that, no, you don't have to have chemotherapy. But I would say that we shouldn't see these things as all bad things. It'd be different if a mother with 5 kids came down at the age of 36. Yeah, you gotta weigh some things in perspective. But even that mother at 36 might say, I might want to spend that last year going to the beach and running with my kids and letting them remember me that way than being throwing up and vomiting and everything. However, again, another situation may be, I'll live long enough to see my first grandchild be born. So I think when you truly have a terminal illness, no, you do not have to take any experimental medications. People that believe in a Judeo-Christian philosophy, we don't believe in life here on earth at all costs forever and ever. There's something more. And so it has to be the individual. The only thing I would say is, again, doctors aren't soothsayers. No one knows. And I've seen people that, a friend of mine, his grandmother, was on death's doorstep 5 different times, with bladder cancer. The last time she was 86 years old, the family was all gathered around the bedside. Well, she recovered. She was making baby quilts at 88. She was still painting her 2nd-story house at 90, and she lived till she was 96. Oh my God. But it happens. I mean, the thing is there's a prejudice against anybody over 80, sorry. You go to the hospital, there's that prejudice. You know, you've lived your life. Do you really want to go through this? When we had to have that healthcare meeting for my father, about my mother, and my father was there, and this is classic. All doctors in all meetings say this. If we had to do CPR on your mother, we'll probably break her ribs, and that would be painful for her. And, of course, my sister Diane's all emotional. Sorry, Diane. But she's all emotional. I don't want to break Mom's ribs. And my younger brother, Pat, Tim, who's the opinionated one, said, Dad, you've had heart surgery and CPR how many times? And he said, too many to count. He said, have your ribs ever been broken? No. But it's just how you can get a little 2-year-old, well, not always, but how you can manipulate a 2-year-old to get them to do what you want. These people, they can manipulate a sick and vulnerable person, and it's very, very scary. And that's how I started to think about all the people I've advocated for. Now I have people that call me from around the Twin Cities, but everywhere, asking advice. I have a loved one in this condition or that condition. And these aren't all like Terry Schiavo cases. I had a 91-year-old man that they wanted to place in hospice. I said, what's wrong with him? Does he have cancer? No. Does he have a terminal illness? No. Does he have any heart problems? No. Is he ambulatory? No. Yes. Is he eating on his own? Oh, yeah, he eats by himself. And I said, well, what's wrong with him? He falls down a lot. Well, at 90, that was the reason they wanted him to go into hospice care. I've had other cases where a 56-year-old man wanted to live, and they wanted to put a BiPAP or a CPAP mask on, and the doctors were saying, no, that was extraordinary. That kind of treatment is like, it's the last step before you go on a ventilator. So but it's not an actual tube or anything. So sometimes oxygen is considered extraordinary care. And you also have to avoid terms, outdated terms that I just used, like extraordinary care, because what's ordinary or extraordinary today can be very ordinary tomorrow. I mean, who would have thought that we would be advancing? And again, it's not life at all costs, but we do have a duty, we do not have absolute personal autonomy over our bodies. And we are, from a spiritual sense, we are the creators. And we're to care for ourselves, our earthly bodies, as long as God lets us live. And this isn't Frankenstein. My mother had to go back on a ventilator. I had to make a decision. I was called to come. They were going to have to do a trach on her. And my mother was a talker. And to realize she would not be able to talk, I never thought she would say yes to that. And when she had a trach in intensive care, it meant she wasn't going to be able to eat. Well, if my mom couldn't have her lemon meringue pie and couldn't talk, and she was in this condition, I didn't think she'd ever do it. And I went in and I told her, and she said, I'll do it. And so that was about 10 days before she died. And then, of course, she died. But when the end was coming near, she was still on a ventilator. We did not take the ventilator off, and her heart just gave out. So sometimes people have the idea that the ventilator is just going to keep you going forever, 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 forever. And it isn't. It isn't. And in general, too, remember that a ventilator was designed to give comfort and aid, and that it's not all the big, bad, boogeyman, evil thing that people make it out to be. And this is where you have to be careful. It may just be a bridge to get you from here to there. Now, I'll be honest with you. 3 weeks before this accident Brother Michael had his accident, and we were very involved in pro-life. He says, something ever happens to me, why all these people say this to me, but if something ever happens to me, I would not want to live my whole life on a ventilator. And so I made that commitment. I said, okay, And so in the end, we did everything we could for Brother Michael, but he had a sepsis condition, and he wasn't able to absorb oxygen. They told us it was 99% fatal, no matter, with very aggressive measures. And, he died within minutes. But I'm so grateful for the time we had and for the lives he's touched. And I can go on and on and on, but I won't, because I only have 3 minutes left. I'm watching my time cards. But people used to go into his bedside and pray, just ask to be with him. Not that any great miracles happened, but people that were dying of brain tumors, people that were struggling with chemical dependency. My father, when he came to the funeral of Brother Michael, said, he's the one with all the health issues, and he suffered a lot. He stayed alive as long as he could for my mother. He said, I will never complain again. And he didn't. So Brother Michael touched a lot of people, and I am grateful for this opportunity to share with you, and grateful that you took the time to be here, and hope you have a wonderful evening and year. God bless you all.
Please be sure to complete the workshop evaluation form located on your seat. You may leave it in your chair when the workshop is over. Don't forget to sign up for the giveaway items at the various exhibit booths. Items are given away at the end of each general session, but you must be present at the general session to collect the prize, and we have some awesome prizes this year. Audio CDs for every session are available at the CD sales booth located in the exhibit area across the hall from registration. The booth will remain open following Saturday evening's closing banquet. The screening of the movie A Voice for Life will be held at 7:30 p.m. in the Grand Ballroom tonight. A sample press release which your chapter can use to promote your attendance at the convention is available in the press office located in City Terrace 4. or the convention office. We also have a photographer on hand to take your photo, and you can order the prints online. Thank you.